When Terry Wood returned home from a night of bowling early on February 20th, 1987, he found his wife Roxanne dead on the kitchen floor of their Niles, Michigan home. Roxanne Wood was allegedly raped and had her throat slit, according to detectives. Although DNA from the crime scene was retained, there wasn't enough evidence at the time to prosecute anyone with a crime due to technological constraints. As a result, the case was abandoned. Then, 34 years later, forensic genetic genealogist Gabriela Vargas began working on a case deemed unsolvable by many because of the scant amount of DNA that was left. Roxanne Wood took up a motherly role with her younger siblings, Brad and Janet. Roxanne was going to meet Terry at home after work on February 19, 1987, in the evening. The pair went to a restaurant in separate cars and had supper together. Later, they visited a neighboring bowling alley where Terry was allegedly a league player, according to authorities. After spending the night out with friends, Roxanne was on her way to return home the following day, approximately 45 minutes ahead of her spouse, Terry. She was found dead on the kitchen floor by Terry when he arrived home. "My wife has been murdered," he informed the local police over the phone. "She is dead. She has been cut." Terry also appeared to become aggressive with first responders that evening, according to the investigators. Additionally, Terry promptly requested an attorney when he was taken to the station for standard interrogation. Investigators began to have concerns after seeing this. According to Janet Wood, an investigator working on Roxanne's murder case told Terry, "I think you're the killer, and I won't stop until you're in jail." Janet continued, "Terry didn't kill her sister, as she always knew. She also mentioned the likelihood that her sister's murderer might still be at large. I never gave up hope. This guy, after all, just didn't do this and went on to live a spotless, pure life for the rest of his life." The murder of Roxanne Woods in 1987 remained unsolved due to technological limitations. Only a little portion of the remaining 1987 DNA evidence from Roxanne's case was preserved by the Michigan State Police. Over 30 years after Roxanne's death, in 2020, they began examining novel approaches to resolving the case using some innovative thinking. In 2020, the Michigan State Police received assistance in the Roxanne Wood case from Western Michigan University students and Professor Ashlyn Corsten. More than 3,500 pages from the 1987 case file were digitized by the students, which sped up and simplified the process of looking through the evidence for information. The officers can search a name and determine whether they've already been interviewed, something they would not be able to accomplish by simply turning through thousands of pages, according to the student Samantha Rogers. In an effort to expand the inquiry, Detective First Lieutenant Chuck Christensen got in touch with Colleen Fitzpatrick, a genetic genealogist and president of Identifiers International. Her company uses DNA analysis to identify victims of violent crimes and unidentified remains. Colleen Fitzpatrick stated, "In 2020, Identifiers International began investigating the unidentified DNA that remained from Roxanne's case. We discovered that there was, what I would call, a gnat's eyebrow of DNA left, about 3% of what we normally use. It felt extremely impossible." Following over a year and a half of analyzing the scant remaining DNA to crack the Roxanne Wood case, Colleen Fitzpatrick speaks with Gabriela Vargas, an international consultant for IDs, about the case. Fitzpatrick didn't want to disappoint investigators after months of failure. Vargas examined the case file and used the murderer's trace DNA to create a genetic profile. She subsequently inputted the DNA data into an online database. Gabriela Vargas began creating the suspect's family tree in April 2021 by using the online DNA database. A man by the name of Patrick Gilham, living in South Bend, Indiana, not far from the crime scene, was identified according to the family tree. Gilham was monitored by investigators in an effort to obtain his DNA. Trooper Ryan Codd, who was undercover, saw that Gillum was a smoker and realized that a cigarette would make an ideal specimen for a DNA sample. After speaking with Gillum outside the laundromat, Trooper Codd picked up his cigarette. Investigators brought Patrick Gilham in for an interview on July 29, 2021. They assured him that nothing was wrong and that they needed to ask him some questions regarding a previous case. The detective informed Gilham that Roxanne had been beaten and showed him pictures of her. When they questioned Gilham about Roxanne, he denied knowing her. He quickly said, "I need to talk to my lawyer," and the detectives released him. 67 years old, Patrick Gilham was taken into custody on February 17, 2022, and interrogated for over 5 hours. When asked why his DNA was discovered at the site, he repeatedly told police, "I have no idea and I don't remember." At the conclusion of the interview, Gilham requested an attorney. After entering a plea of not guilty to second-degree murder, Gilham was sentenced to at least 23 years in prison on April 25, 2022, for the 1987 murder of Roxanne Wood. Terry Wood was regarded as a person of interest until his arrest in Gilham, according to Detective John Moore. For 35 years, he labored under false assumptions that he was the one who murdered his wife. Detective Jason Bailey said, "I'd heard stories that sometimes he'd walk into a place and somebody would call him Slash. Brad Woods, Roxanne's brother, was only around when his sister was killed. He said that when they eventually located the person who killed his sister, he couldn't believe it. It appeared unreal, you know. It wasn't at all like the mental image I had of myself when they knocked on my door to tell me they had him." After more than 4 decades, a Long Island cold case has finally been solved, revealing the identity of the culprit. Irene Wilkowitz braced herself in the kitchen of her Rhode Island apartment, waiting to hear the news the detectives had brought. The last time cops showed up at her doorstep, she was 17, and they told her they'd discovered her sister's body. 20 years old, Eve had been abducted, sexually assaulted, and strangled after taking a late-night train home from Manhattan, where she worked as a secretary at a publishing house. Her body was discovered in a yard next to her apartment in Bay Shore, New York, on the South Shore of Long Island, on March 22, 1980. It was 42 years ago. Since then, Wilkowitz had attended college, worked, got married, had 2 kids, got divorced, and moved away from Long Island. Throughout this time, she had lived in constant terror that the murderer would return for her and wondered if they would ever find him. She became Eve's last line of defense, writing investigators every few weeks with updates and a suggestion to attempt a DNA-based investigative method that has recently been successful in solving hundreds of cold cases nationwide. They were trying, the investigators assured her. As she waited for their news, she made an effort to lower her expectations. She had suffered enough of disappointment already. She drew a long breath as Detective Jeffrey Batari of the Suffolk County Police said, "We have determined who killed your sister Eve." Wilkowitz's legs started to tremble. She gave a hug to her 25-year-old son Evan, who was given Eve's name. Wilkowitz recalls, "I never thought I'd hear those words, so I started crying." Herbert Rice was his name. According to Batari, he passed away from cancer in 1991, leaving 2 boys who were unaware of his past. Rice had never come under suspicion during the copious and thorough police investigation into the murder, which involved interviewing hundreds of witnesses and canvassing dozens of streets. His arrest history was limited to minor infractions, for which he was not asked to submit a DNA sample that would have been stored in criminal databases. A familial DNA search, which looks for relatives in the criminal database, was also unsuccessful. The cops were ultimately able to get the solution because to a new technology called genetic genealogy. This would never have been resolved without DNA. Raymond Tierney, the district attorney for Suffolk County, stated, however, Wilkowitz's decades of fear, anxiety, and loss will not be eased by learning who killed her sister. This was all I wanted for 42 years, Wilkowitz remarked, "All I wanted was for it to end. Beyond becoming a mother, I didn't let myself dream of anything else because I was terrified that someone might come along and kill me. I'm still here, and I can't comprehend that it's solved now." Eve was Wilkowitz's only sibling. Irene was the only surviving family member who could speak on Eve's behalf after their father passed away in 2010 and their mother departed from cancer before Eve's death. She conducted interviews with local media on the anniversaries of her passing as a means of preventing Long Island from forgetting. She wasn't well known. She wasn't a celebrity. Wilkowitz stated, "She was my sister, and she matters." Wilkowitz's son informed her in 2018 of a new method California officials had employed in their investigation to identify the Golden State Killer, a serial rapist and murderer. Police have linked the family tree to a former police officer by entering DNA from the crime scene into consumer DNA databases, such as GED Match, Family Tree DNA, and MyHeritage. This was the first violent crime to be solved by genetic genealogy. A wave of interest in the technique resulted, and a small industry of private laboratories collaborating with genetic genealogists to reinvestigate crimes committed decades ago emerged. However, the strategy also alarmed privacy advocates who worried about government abuse of citizens' private information, and some states were reluctant to approve its application. Wilkowitz sought assistance from the most well-known genetic genealogist, C.C. Moore, in January 2019. Wilkowitz was informed by Moore that the procedure was not yet legal in New York. Thus, she was unable to assist. To conduct such work, private labs had to apply for a permit from the State Department of Health, which is an extensive process that might take months or years. To date, no has been granted approval. Since then, the Department of Health has authorized 2 companies to provide genetic genealogy services to New York police. Wilkowitz pleaded for a solution from Suffolk County Police Lieutenant Kevin Bearer, the homicide detective in charge of Eve's case. He was also annoyed because he was unable to take on genetic genealogy. However, Suffolk County officials devised a solution in December 2019. They requested permission from the New York Department of Health to give the FBI DNA samples taken from semen found on Eve's body. The FBI was unrestricted by New York law and had assisted with the initial 1980 investigation. Following approval from the state and the FBI, an FBI agent with expertise in genetic genealogy informed Suffolk County investigators in July 2021 that she had located a distant relative of the unidentified culprit who happened to have the last name Rice. Based on the information, police discovered long-dead Herbert Rice. When they were unable to obtain a DNA sample to support their theory, they traced one of his sons. Detective Bottari knocked on the son's door and explained their plan after attempting in vain to obtain a clandestine DNA sample from him. According to the son, Bottari claimed he had not been in close contact with his father and had given the investigator permission to swab his cheek. Late August, the son's father's identity as the murderer was confirmed by the DNA sample. The son and his mother were informed by Bottari, who elaborated further on the narrative. The son's mother said that she had expelled Rice from their home at the time of the murder. He had moved in with his mother, who resided roughly 4 homes away from the yard where Eve Wilkowitz's body was found on March 25, 1980, according to authorities. Detectives saw in the case file that police had questioned his mother during their neighborhood sweep. According to Bottari, she informed them that she hadn't noticed anything. Despite not having done anything wrong, the son informed investigators that he still wished he could make amends with Wilkowitz's family. The son could not be immediately reached for comment, according to the police. The mother of the son declined to comment. In order to inform Irene Wilkowitz of their findings, Bottari and a sergeant from the homicide section paid her a visit on December 6th. Because Wilkowitz is still terrified to live alone, she shares an apartment with her son and works as a nanny. She assumed that the investigators were likely coming to inform her that they had reached their ultimate dead end, given the remote possibility of a breakthrough. While Bottari used FaceTime to patch in the FBI agent who conducted the genealogy inquiry, she introduced them to Evan and struck up a conversation. According to Bottari, these are the most thrilling visits we can make in order to provide a family with some form of resolution. We have decades of investigators working on this, especially for her. As the investigators delivered Wilkowitz with Herbert's name and birth date, she sobbed in her son's arms. They explained to her how they had solved it. It astounded her. After expressing her gratitude to the detectives, they departed after around half an hour. Wilkowitz spent some time sobbing afterwards. She contacted Beyer and thanked him, while still trembling. Wilkowitz stated that she was willing to speak with Herbert's kid. Bottari attempted to link them. The son has informed cops that he is thinking about it. Wilkowitz stated, "All I want to say is thank you, and let him and his family know how sorry I am that a family member is guilty of a crime like this. And that's awful for them too. They have to live with that knowledge." In order to confirm they had the proper man, Suffolk County officials obtained a search warrant and exhumed Herbert's remains before declaring the case solved. On March 23rd, which is almost 42 years to the day Eve vanished, the results were released. According to Bottari, the samples extracted from the remains matched the suspect's DNA. It was him. Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison stated that without science and genetic genealogy, we never would have been able to go so deeply, locate the family members, and then locate Mr. Rice. Beyer appraised Wilkowitz for keeping attention on the search for the killer. Beyer stated, "I think she's the star in this case, and she deserves the credit." Although the case has been concluded, Wilkowitz is still traumatized by the loss of her sister and the decades she spent without knowing who ended her life. She is still left with unanswered questions. I can't ask him anything. He did it, but why? Why did he target a lovely, naive woman who was simply making her way home? Stated Wilkowitz. Actually, there are no answers, no justification. She hopes to find a way to keep speaking up for her sister and possibly other victims' families whose cases are still pending, telling them that there is always hope. Her sister was more than simply a media narrative perpetuated over and over. Wilkowitz asserted that she was a real person. She was gregarious, had many friends, and loved horses and music. She liked reading, writing, and drawing. Additionally, she enjoyed being my older sister. That is what I want people to know. Sonia Houston was uncertain about the cause of her mother's death 4 years prior. Houston claimed to have thought that if anything was at fault, it was most likely her drinking. Up until May 31st, when Austin, Texas authorities disclosed that Raul Meza Jr., a 62-year-old convicted murderer, had confessed to several crimes, including the 2019 death of Houston's 66-year-old mother, Gloria Lofton. Houston added that if he hadn't confessed, she would have remained unknown, criticizing the authorities for their inadequate investigation into her mother's passing. Meza, who was the subject of a manhunt for his roommate's death on May 20th, turned himself in last month after he called the city hotline and was put in contact with a homicide detective, according to the police. Raul Meza claimed in an affidavit supporting his arrest that was filed in Travis County District Court on Wednesday, "My name is Raul Meza, and I think you're looking for me," followed by his confession to the crime. Meza, who served 11 years in prison for the 1982 murder and sexual assault of an 8-year-old girl, has since been accused of murder in both deaths. According to Austin police, they are investigating possible connections between Meza and up to 10 unsolved murders from the 1990s. The discovery has enraged Houston against authorities of their handling of the inquiry. Houston claimed that a long-running investigation had produced little results and seemed to have overlooked important evidence, such as a used condom she had discovered in her mother's kitchen. Authorities accused him of sexually assaulting Lofton and strangling her, according to the affidavit. This accusation was partially substantiated by a swab obtained from Lofton at the time of her death, which revealed Mez's DNA in 2020. However, the Travis County Medical Examiner categorized her cause and manner of death as unknown in the months following the discovery of her body, as stated in the affidavit. Houston claimed that after Meza admitted to the detective on May 24th that he was the one who killed the woman on Sarah Drive, she never heard from the police again. Houston's older sister, Christina Fultz, stated in an interview that things would have been different if she had been white and lived on the other side of Austin. A week would have been enough to solve it. Gloria Lofton, a resident of Austin's East Side, was of Mexican origin. A representative for the Austin Police Department stated via email that Chief Joseph Chacon was recently informed of the case's specifics and that an administrative examination of any possible investigative shortcomings had been started. The spokesman said that they would not elaborate further. The Travis County spokesman stated that there is an ongoing inquiry and that he was unable to comment on the methods used by the medical examiner's office to arrive at their report. The affidavit states that Lofton's manner and cause of death were changed to homicide by strangulation by a medical examiner one day following Meza's confession. A request for comment from Meza's attorney, who was being jailed at the Travis County Correctional Complex on a charge of capital murder, went unanswered. The reason behind Lofton's death is still a mystery. Authorities were informed by Meza, according to the affidavit, that he was guaranteed a quarter of the money that Lofton's nephew would inherit. Houston clarified, however, that her mother had no nephews. Houston claimed she was unsure if her mother was acquainted with Meza. Houston characterized Lofton's relationship as complex. Houston claimed that her mother was incredibly intelligent and had exposed her to films, music, and books. To pay for her daughter's attendance at a private Catholic school, Houston said Lofton put in a lot of effort in her accounting, administrative, and other clerical work. Houston stated that Lofton was troubled. She added that Lofton had been physically and psychologically abused by men, and that she had never dealt with the problems that seemed to fester with age. According to Houston, her father was very respectful and only stayed with Lofton till their daughter was 4 years old. He was in the Army and Air Force. In her late 40s, Lofton gave up her job, moved in with her father, and drank a lot, according to Houston. The last time she saw her mother, according to her, was on May 8, 2019, when Lofton sent her to buy a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of beer. Houston stated that after forcing her mother to eat, she grudgingly consented. When Houston got home the following day, she was received by police, who informed her that her mother had passed away. According to the complaint, authorities discovered her in her bedroom, naked except for the 2 shirts she was wearing pulled over her head. After roughly a day, the authorities returned her mother's house keys and declared that she could go back to her mother's house. They did not provide many specifics about what had happened. Fultz, Houston's elder sister, accompanied her to the residence. Although Lofton had placed her older daughter for adoption when she was a newborn, the sisters grew close in the years preceding Lofton's passing. Fultz recalled that we sat outside and watched the forensic people leave with bags, and they said nothing to us. We weren't warned about the house by them. They said nothing at all regarding the scene of the crime. Fultz said it was really insensitive. It was frightening. According to Houston, the sisters entered and discovered a house that appeared to have been broken into. Blood splashes and a bloody pillow could be seen down the corridor. Fultz claimed that they discovered lubricant, a condom, and a wrapper inside what looked to be a latex detective glove in the kitchen. Fultz reported that Houston sobbed and rushed outdoors. It was the worst cry, she continued. I could only give her a hug. An inquiry for comment was not answered by a representative of the police department. In spite of the incident, Houston concluded that her mother's drinking was probably the cause of her demise. Did she knock her head when intoxicated? Stated Houston. She was home alone, Accidents do happen to those who have been intoxicated. Was she trying to squirm her way into bed? The inconsistent results of the autopsy perplexed Houston. However, Lofton did not seek legal counsel as several had urged. Instead, she stayed focused on burying her mother and finalizing her affairs. She is now seeking justice for her mother. They wanted us to put all the blame on the criminal and the offender. Yeah, I can talk about Raoul all day long, she said. Karma is a very serious thing. Am I supposed to say they handle this to the best of their abilities? She continued. By the appearance of it, not at all. In 1991, a lady was discovered on the east shore of Staten Island, New York, with her body burned, strangled, and battered. It was a passerby who discovered the victim's body in the weeds on a South Beach road shortly after daybreak on September 20, 1991. In a deserted lot, she was discovered face up, shackled, half-clothed, and burned. She had 17 hits to her skull when she was discovered, and a hammer had been found nearby. Investigators think the crime was committed using the hammer that was found at the site and had Lloyd L. inscribed on the handle. Authorities also discovered a pack of Newport cigarettes, 2 gold necklaces, a ring watch, and 30 cents on the woman's body. The crime remained unresolved at first because police were unable to identify the victim or the offender. A guy named Lloyd L. was identified, but that was the extent to which the investigation proceeded at the time. There was no other proof of his involvement. Under those circumstances, he could not be cleared or prosecuted. Over the years, the victim's unique body tattoo of a scorpion earned her an alias of the girl with a scorpion tattoo. The district attorney's office reopened the case in 2008 and sent the FBI her dental records and DNA, but they produced no fresh leads. In 2019, Richmond County District Attorney Michael E. McMahon chose to re-examine the case by collaborating with the FBI, NYPD, and New York Medical Examiner's Office to employ forensic genealogy techniques. At a news conference in March 2023, Michael McMahon revealed that the victim's name was Christine Belusko, a 30-year-old. When Christine was a baby, she was given up for adoption and raised by a couple in New Jersey. She was a clothes store employee and resided in Clifton. In 1991, after learning she was adopted, she ran away from home and spent a short time at the Mount Airy Lodge in Pennsylvania's Poconos. Krista Nicole Belusko was the name of her 2-year-old daughter. September 1991 was the last time either Krista or Christine was spotted at the resort. Presuming Christine was safely residing in Florida, none of her family members were aware that she had passed away. According to Michael McMahon, Christine's family has already been informed of her untimely death, and efforts are still being made to find Krista Nicole so that she can be informed about her mother's identity and the actions taken to ensure that justice is served in this instance. Authorities were unable to identify her or track down the individual who killed her so brutally and mercilessly at such a young age, despite the extraordinarily committed work being done at the time by the NYPD. In an endeavor involving the FBI and the NYPD detectives, my amazing team of detective investigators took up the case nearly 30 years later. Together, we used forensic genealogical technology, which was not available in 1991 but is crucial in today's world of law enforcement, to bring justice and closure to the victims of crime. Although the matter is still being investigated, McMahon stated that investigators think she knew the culprit. No evidence at all suggests that anyone other than a person who knew her did this. We are definitely led to believe that this was someone who knew her, given the case's facts and the manner in which her life was ended. According to McMahon, this kind of killing is personal. An age progression photo of Krista was released, and the search for her whereabouts continues. The identity of Krista's father is currently unknown. Call the Richmond County District Attorney's Office at 718-556-7085 if you know anything regarding the murder of Christine Belusko or if you recognize Krista Nicole. If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of unsolved cases.